As an Uber driver, I had seen my fair share of strange and rude passengers, but nothing could have prepared me for the nightmarish experience that unfolded one fateful evening. It was a chilly Friday night, and I was cruising through the dimly lit streets of the city, hoping to pick up a few fares before calling it a night. I received a ride request from a nearby location, and the passenger's name simply read Mystery. I thought it was odd, but I accepted the request and headed towards the pickup spot. I arrived to find a group of 3 people waiting, huddled together and whispering amongst themselves. The leader of the group, a tall, imposing man, approached my car and opened the rear door without a word. "Hey, where are you guys heading?" I asked politely, trying to break the ice. "Just drive," he grumbled, not even making eye contact. The 2 others, a man and a woman, followed him into the back seat. They all reeked of alcohol and had the demeanor of troublemakers. I felt uneasy but decided to continue the ride, hoping they would calm down. However, the atmosphere inside the car grew increasingly tense. They talked loudly, used offensive language, and even spat out the window without any regard for decency. I could feel my patience wearing thin, but I kept my focus on the road. As we reached a stoplight, the leader, who was sitting behind me, leaned forward and began taunting me. "Hey, driver, you ever been in a real scary situation?" he slurred. I tried to ignore him, but he persisted. "I'm asking you a question, man. You ever been scared out of your mind?" I finally gave in and replied, "Sure. I've had my fair share of creepy passengers, but nothing too crazy." The leader grinned maliciously and leaned in even closer. "Well, you're in for a treat tonight, buddy." Before I could react, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife, brandishing it inches from my face. Panic surged through me as I swerved the car, narrowly avoiding a collision with another vehicle. The 2 passengers in the back seat erupted into laughter, their amusement fueled by my terror. The leader finally withdrew the knife and chuckled. "Just messing with you, man. Relax." I couldn't believe what had just transpired. I was on edge, my hands trembling on the steering wheel as I drove in silence. The passengers continued to berate me, making crude remarks and demanding that I speed up. To make matters worse, the passengers started deliberately making a mess of my car. They crumbled food wrappers, spilled drinks, and even threw garbage out of the windows. The interior of my car, once clean and inviting, now resembled a dumpster. Halfway through the ride, as we approached a dimly lit, desolate area of the city, I decided I had endured enough. I pulled over and said, "I can't continue with this ride. Get out of my car." The leader, still holding the knife, glared at me and said, "You're going to regret this, driver." Without hesitation, I canceled the ride and unlocked the doors. The passengers exited the car, leaving a trail of trash behind them. As they walked away, they continued to hurl insults and threats my way. I watched them disappear into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe the horror I had just experienced. I quickly reported the incident to Uber and the local authorities, providing all the information I could. That night, I realized just how dangerous and unpredictable the job of an Uber driver could be. It was a chilling reminder that you never truly know who you're picking up, and sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that happen in real life. It was a chilly October night when I summoned an Uber to take me home after a long day at work. I'd always thought of Uber as a convenient and safe way to get around the city, but that night would shatter my illusions forever. The car arrived, and I hopped into the back seat, eager to get home and relax. But as soon as I settled in, I knew something was off. The car reeked of a pungent, musty odor, like a mix of old cigarettes and spoiled food. I gagged, but I assumed I could endure the discomfort for the short ride home. The driver, a middle-aged man with a scruffy beard, didn't say a word as he pulled away from the curb. I tried to strike up a conversation to alleviate the awkwardness, but he only responded with grunts and monosyllabic answers. It was clear he had no interest in being friendly. As the ride continued, my unease grew. I glanced around the car, and it was a mess. Empty fast food containers were scattered on the floor, and the dashboard was covered in dust. The cracked windshield obscured my view, making me wonder how this car had passed any kind of safety inspection. Suddenly, the driver took an unexpected turn down a dimly lit, desolate street that I didn't recognize. My heart started pounding in my chest, and I immediately pulled out my phone to check the route. It appeared that he was taking a shortcut, but the area we were in seemed far from the main road and there were no other cars in sight. I tried to suppress my growing panic, convincing myself that I was just overreacting. But then the driver's behavior took a sinister turn. He began muttering to himself, and I could barely make out what he was saying. It was a disturbing mix of whispers and incoherent ramblings. My mind raced, and I contemplated whether I should demand that he let me out of the car. Before I could act, the driver abruptly stopped the car in the middle of the deserted street. My heart was now pounding so loudly that I could hear it in my ears. He turned to me, his eyes wild and bloodshot, and said, "This is where you get out." Fear washed over me like a tidal wave. I knew I couldn't stay in the car with this man any longer. I fumbled for the door handle and practically jumped out of the car, my legs trembling. As I slammed the door shut, the driver peeled away, disappearing into the darkness. I was left alone on that eerie street, shaking and terrified. I quickly requested another Uber, and when the new driver arrived, I immediately reported the previous driver's behavior to the company. They assured me they would investigate the incident. To this day, I shudder at the memory of that terrifying Uber ride. It was a nightmarish experience that shattered my trust in the platform's safety measures. I realized that sometimes the real horror isn't just in the movies, but can happen when you least expect it, lurking in the back seat of an Uber car driven by a disturbed and dangerous individual. From that day on, I've been extra cautious whenever I use ride-sharing services, always keeping an eye out for any red flags that could signal danger, and I hope that sharing my story will encourage others to do the same. It was a muggy night in Miami, and I was hustling through the city streets, hoping to snag a few more fares before calling it a night. Being an Uber driver in Florida had its share of ups and downs, but nothing could have prepared me for the spine-tingling horror that awaited me that fateful evening. As I navigated the labyrinthine streets, I received a new ride request. The pickup location was a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. I sighed, knowing these late-night pickups often led to troublesome passengers. Little did I know that this particular fare would redefine the meaning of troublesome. I arrived at the motel, a dimly lit and eerie place. Standing under the flickering neon sign was a couple, both seemingly in their mid-30s. The woman wore a tight-fitting dress that left little to the imagination, while the man's face was adorned with a scraggly beard that concealed his expressions. They hopped into the back seat without a word, and I could sense something was off. They were whispering to each other in hushed tones, occasionally glancing at me with sinister grins. My unease grew with each passing minute. "Where to?" I asked, trying to sound as composed as possible. The man finally spoke, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Take us to the Glades, buddy, and step on it." The Glades? That desolate, swampy wilderness on the outskirts of Miami? It was a place I'd never dared venture at night, but the fare was too good to pass up. I sped toward the Everglades, the tension in the car thick enough to cut with a knife. The couple continued their hushed conversation, occasionally breaking into eerie laughter that sent shivers down my spine. As we neared the desolate entrance to the Everglades, the woman suddenly spoke up, her voice dripping with malice. "You know, we've got a little friend with us tonight." My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. Nestled between the couple on the back seat was an alligator, its beady eyes fixed on me. My heart raced as I struggled to keep the car on the road. "What the hell is that thing doing here?" I stammered, my voice quivering. The man chuckled darkly. "Our service animal, buddy. Don't worry, he's trained." The alligator shifted in the back seat, its jaws snapping dangerously close to the man's hand. My fear was reaching a boiling point, and I desperately searched for an escape plan. Just as I was about to slam on the brakes and make a run for it, the woman whispered, "Stop the car." I complied, my hands trembling as I brought the car to a halt on the pitch-black road leading into the Glades. The couple climbed out, taking their alligator with them. I watched in horror as they disappeared into the swamp, their laughter echoing through the night. With shaking hands, I reached for my phone to dial 911, but something stopped me. As I looked around, I realized the darkness had swallowed the couple and their alligator entirely. There was no sign of them anywhere. Terrified and shaken to my core, I sped out of the Everglades, never looking back. I later reported the incident to the police, but there was no trace of the mysterious couple or their reptilian companion. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that I encountered something otherworldly that night in the Florida Everglades. It was a horror story straight out of a nightmare, and I'll never forget the eerie laughter, the malevolent passengers, and that alligator. A creature that turned a routine Uber ride into the most terrifying experience of my life.